Welcome. Today is Bell Let's Talk Day, and from us at Superior Media to you, we hope to be helping with this conversation. With me on the desk is Jacob Moore. You usually see him when we do 705 Sports. He has done some interesting work with mental health in the community. I obviously have done some interesting work with mental health in the community, and we're going to see a compilation of those today in the next few minutes. But it is Bell Let's Talk, Jacob. So what does this day mean to you?
This is an important day for myself in general. I've myself have struggled with mental health. I've had very close friends of mine who have struggled and unfortunately lost their battle to mental health. But this is an important day because the biggest part of it is to break that stigma and open up the conversation. And that's what this day is all about. And that's exactly what we're doing here today, Dan. We're opening the doors for lines of communication. And we're working to try to make this less of a taboo subject.
And I think taboo is absolutely the word that needs to be used. This is not a subject that needs to be talked about today and left in the closet for the other 364. It is a subject that we here have been working in a series, and you'll see a bunch of that in a few minutes here, in a series to bring to the community and to a nation on more than just one day out of the year. It's great there's going to be millions raised today. Mm-hmm. That's just the way it's been for years, and it's wonderful that Bell goes ahead and does this. But there's more to it than just today. I think it's very important, and we touch on it on our weekly show on a more frequent than we'd like to, but the mental health aspect to living, and being that it is one of the darkest days of the year, and this is why they pick it's one of the hardest months to get through. I know I've struggled, and I still struggle with mental health also, and I've lost friends, and we've lost community members that unfortunately lose their battle. And it's very important, if ever you feel like you have nowhere to turn, I know there's going to be a number thrown on the bottom here, call that number. They are always there. They will listen. They will help you get through those moments. I, for one, have called that number. It is nice to have that voice there when nobody else feels like they're listening.
And I think the important thing too is to remember that people do care. People do want to see you succeed, even when there's times you feel like nobody's there. And I think that's been even harder in this predicament we're in the world. And obviously it's been a struggle on people's mental health where we can't interact face to face the way we normally can. But remember, people are just a phone call away. And people do care, and to have the conversation. If you have a broken leg, you don't pretend the leg's not broken. There's nothing wrong with having a mental health issue. It just means you can talk to someone, work through it, and get the help you need. And that's really what we're trying to focus on with this series. And Dan, you've done an awesome job with these interviews. And they're super, super important to the community and, the world in general, because mental health is still something that people aren't comfortable talking with. And it's harder, right, to talk about your psyche versus...
But then you see people like Carey Price who come out and talk about it. You see people like Theo Fleury who have come out and talked about it. And you see people and...
Jonathan Drouin as well.
And then you see people in the arts and entertainment world that come out and talk about it. And we lose people like Robin Williams because of it. Mm-hmm. Yet it seems to not have made that big a difference in being able to talk about it.
Well, it's the same thing too. I can think of in the sports world, someone like Wade Belak, who unfortunately lost his battle. Same with Rick Griffin, who they recently did a tribute
to, absolutely,
which was a beautiful tribute. If I'm not gonna lie, if they say you shouldn't cry, well, I was crying at home because it was was an emotional.
And right there, we catch people after the fact. We catch the Belaks and others, and we give them beautiful tributes for losing their life. Robin Williams again, for losing their life to a battle where if they could have felt comfortable in speaking out about it, maybe somebody was there to listen. Maybe we're not talking about them in a past tense versus they're here to speak about their issues. And with that, thank you for joining me, Jacob. And we're going to go to a series, I believe it is 5 videos here that we've talked to different community members about addictions, mental health, and homelessness in our community. I hope you find the information involved in these helpful in any way, shape, or form. Good afternoon, or good morning, whatever time you are watching this. My name is Dan Gray. I am here with Batchewana Chief Dean Sayers and Dorothy Sayad, who is the program manager at Anishinaabe. Thank you for joining me both, and if I messed up either of those, I apologize. We're here talking about, it's an ongoing series here with mental health addictions and homelessness, and this is a very important portion to this, and speaking with individuals from our local Indigenous community. So I thank you both for joining me.
No problem.
So it was brought to our attention back when they did the point in time survey here in Sault Ste. Marie that many of the individuals in the downtown cores for Sault Ste. Marie, there's a significant segment of that population that does come from an Indigenous background. And we know it's very generational in happening. What are from your guys' point of view, what are some of the reasons that Indigenous folks leave the reserve to go to bigger centers, whether it be Sault Ste. Marie, Thunder Bay, pick one, and choose to live maybe on the streets there?
Thank you, Bruce. Bonjour, Kinuea, Ogama said I'm Chief Dean Sayers, Crane Clan. I'm from Baoting here, Sault Ste. Marie area. Batchewana First Nation is the area that I have some primary responsibility as the chief. And I deal with that kind of a question in my daily work. We are continually addressing the fallout from colonization. And even if you look back historically, you'll see how there was attempts after we entered into these nation-to-nation relationships with the Crown. There were attempts starting with Sir John A. Macdonald where he actually tried to remove our nationhood status and make us subjects and put us under Canada. And that's when Sir John A. Macdonald said, I'm going to look after Indians and lands reserved for Indians. And it wasn't long after that reserves were established where they could control us and where we didn't have any decision-making power. We still can't own land as a collective. We still have sanctions on so many fronts in so many areas. And it's starting to hit the media. But when you are treated as less than citizens on your own land, when you're limited, when you can't get jobs, when you have you get penalized if you leave your community through systemic processes. I think people want to be free, and they will embark on these journeys to where it looks like it's a rosier place, like cities. So it's a real challenge for us because we live next to the city. So we're trying to work with all the people in our area because for us as Indigenous people here at the center of the Great Lakes, we don't align ourselves with the Indian Act where the Indian Act says, oh, you can't service your people if they don't live in your reserves. We extend supports and services to everybody, wherever they may live in our original reserves, in our original lands that was spoken of in our treaty territories, in the Robinson Huron Treaty territories. They're primary people. They're our guests in our communities. They're guests in our original lands, and we look after them as best we can.
And I think I can attest to that in speaking with Mike Nadeau and a few of the others in the community. They're one of the first to say that you guys are on the ground, even if it is in our city centers, trying to help the individuals as best you can, even though they're not technically on your reserve anymore. And I know, Dorothy, Eric brought to my attention that you ran a detox camp, and I know it's got a really official name, and I'll let you say it because I won't make it out. But what was kind of the purpose behind having that camp? What were some of the goals you were looking to accomplish?
Ani bojo Dorothy Dishnakas. Graven hers donjaba bawati megwa doda. Naganin donjinaki. Anishna manager endau. Gichinenda Mampia. My name is Dorothy Code, and I work with Naganin Services as the Anishna program manager. And I'm happy to be here today. Thank you for inviting me. So we recently, in November, we ran a 10-day pre-treatment detox camp, preparing 6 community members from along the North Shore to attend a treatment cycle at the treatment center in Blind River, Bembawapka. And we did that for lots of different reasons, but one of the main reasons being that the biggest barrier to treatment is just getting to treatment and navigating the systems that allow you to kind of start your bed date. So we had 6 community members from 5 of the First Nations that we service attend that land-based detox and then go into their bed date.
So, do you believe this is something that's going to happen going forward? And do you think it was successful in accomplishing what your goals were that you set out for the event?
Yeah, I think it exceeded all of our expectations for a first opportunity to run something like this, and that happened partly because of the support we had from Batchewana First Nation, from our sister agency, Nongda Windaman, who helped us with staffing. So we had to mitigate a lot of risks. We had to cover our bases in lots of different areas and meet lots of different needs to keep those 6 community members safe and all the staff that were willing to take part and show their support. And it was a real opportunity for our community agencies and our community supports to come together and support these 6 people. And they all 6 completed the camp. Really positive feedback, really good feedback. And of course there was a few bumps along the way, as you can expect, but they were handled really smoothly, really well. We adapted and did everything that we needed to do, and all 6 completed. All 6, got driven to treatment on the day of treatment, and started that program.
So, and definitely something you're looking to continue doing going forward, correct?
Absolutely, and we're hoping we absolutely have thoughts and ideas to roll it out again. So for our in the coming year, we'd like to do it seasonally at least, and tie that in with a treatment cycle, and continue to partnership with Batchewana and other communities, and keep this service being offered.
Thank you for that. Chief Sayers, I know we were talking a little bit off camera before we got started here. When you were saying you're developing a long-term treatment plan, which includes some teachings from Lake Superior, etc. Could you expand on that a little bit more for us?
Oh yeah, there just isn't enough capacity in the treatment field to be able to accommodate the number of people that want to get in-depth treatment for addictions. And everybody knows with, in particular, the fallout from COVID, there is a lot of depression. People are isolated, they're on their own, they're lonely. And over the years, when you come from a people that have been minimized and have had real challenges with being able to be on the land where they would normally find some reprieve, they turn to addictions. And we end up having to find ways of accommodating some programs that can address the depression, can address the foundational root causes, colonization. We deal with all kinds of modern drugs. So the spaces aren't there. And when we do find spaces, they're not always really reflective of the uniqueness and the needs of the Indigenous people, of my people, and how we might want to design an Indigenous holistic program based on the land. And so we purchased a resort in Batchewana First Nation, and it's 80 acres. It's on Lake Superior. It's waterfront. It's a motel. It's got cross-country ski trails. It's got a couple of restaurants, tennis courts, a maple forest. It's got a little marina. It's perfect for a land-based addiction recovery program about 50 miles from the city. So it's a little remote, which is what we really want. We are developing that. We're developing the actual treatment model, working with elders on the teachings that need to be instilled in the confines of the treatment. It will be really a cutting edge program that is going to be unlike any other. We will engage our elders and our knowledge keepers throughout. It'll be full of ceremony. It'll be full of water teachings. It'll be teaching songs. It'll be teaching good ways of being able to deal with the stresses of this modern world. So we are looking for people to help us get that off the ground. Developmental assistance are some of the areas that developmental assessments, program development, lands development. we just have so many things that we're still putting together so the program could be up and running in the next short while.
So I'm going to take a few more minutes of both of your times. I'm going to ask you one question each, and I'm going to start with you, Dorothy. If there's something that our viewers and our readers that are watching this today could do that would help change some of the aspects when it comes to Indigenous mental health addictions and homelessness, what could that be from your point of view?
I think that one of the biggest things that anybody and everybody can do is recognize that someone that's addicted to a substance, there's at least 5 other people that are directly impacted by that addiction. So addiction doesn't happen just to one person. It happens to a family. It happens to a community, and everybody is impacted by that. And in addition, everybody probably has a personal experience, either directly or indirectly, with addiction themselves. So the stigma that's attached to addiction is really misplaced because we all have an experience with addiction. So the programs that we aim to develop at Naganin with the Anishinaabe program are programs that pull all of the person support networks in. So we have family, their family supports are in group, are in treatment, as well as the community member that has that identified addiction. So I think the biggest thing to help people and make sustainable change is to support the entire family. And then that will ripple out and support the entire community.
And thank you for that. And Chief Sayers, I'm going to ask you the same question from your perspective as a chief of Batchewana and dealing with this, like you said, in your daily life. What could our viewers and our readers do to help Indigenous individuals, and just maybe individuals in general, from your point of view, that suffer from substance abuse and homelessness?
I think people need to be educated, and I do agree that it's more than just an individual that's affected. I think it's families, it's our whole community, and I find that people don't have the understanding. There's a high level of ignorance in regards to the history, and I think we need to be a little more accommodating when we start to take a look at why there are all of these things that are happening in our society today. And we need to be looking through a little more liberal lens and be more, I guess, empathetic. So I encourage media as much as they can to try to tell the story from an Indigenous lens in regards to the history, help with creating the cultural esteem, the self-esteem, build people up, and try to reach out and help them. And when we say help, it's not helping by way of doing things for people, but helping by way of showing them how to do things for themselves. And so that we can have a really full, rich community again, with all of the roles that are needed to help us move into the future are taken care of. We have some really intentional expectations as a people, as nations, that we need to have healthy, thriving, balanced individuals, families, communities, and ultimately all of the people that are here on our lands. We need to invest, and we need to find space for everyone, and that means investing in social, that means investing in education, and providing the proper understanding and information so people have a better way of perceiving the plight of Indigenous people. Things are going to start hitting the media in the next while in regards to a lot more issues, like the finding of the children, those 215, like it's up over 7,000 now. The light has went off on us. It's not that there is no more limelight. We need, and there will be other issues that will come to light that we need to continue to get to the bottom of, and we need to encourage people to ask questions so that it doesn't happen again, and repair those types of instances and go down the path of true reconciliation with everybody, including individuals that are in society here in Canada today. Not just the governments, not just the universities, not just the public agencies, but everybody has a role to play in reconciliation.
And thank you for that. Miigwech to both of you for joining me today, and I look forward to speaking to you both of you in the future in regards to issues surrounding Indigenous populations. Thank you, everybody, for joining me.
Thank you.
École publique Éco des Rapides, a place where your child can learn, grow, and be happy. Discover why more and more families are choosing École publique Éco des Rapides for their child. Register your child January 17th to the 21st at epedr.cspgno.ca. Parce que je vois grand.
Hello, I'm here with MPP Ross Romano yet again, and this is the second part of our, we don't know how many part series it's going to be sitting with the sitting MPP for a while. We have lots of ground to cover because there were lots of questions that came back. The next biggest thing we heard about when we put our questions out was the mental health and addictions crisis in Sault Ste. Marie. It is all-consuming. Outside of COVID right now, which is spiking as we're talking and sitting here, right. It's all-consuming, and it's a serious issue. And a lot of people are pointing fingers, and it's just the way, it's the nature of the beast. When people are dying, people start to blame people. One of the people they were starting to blame was you and the provincial government, which is fair because it's hard to see what some of the numbers I'm looking at in front of me that were provided. How much operational dollars have you put into Sault Ste. Marie, at just the Ford government, since 2018?
Well, since 2018, there's been a considerable amount of money. In fact, operational dollars have exceeded $1.6 million. And let's remember, operational, that's year over year over year. And so there's been a considerable amount of money that has been put in capitally as well. There's still a lot more to announce. But I think that it's critical that we understand, very, very critical that we understand. We use words like the continuum of care. And that means that we do not just have services that are confined to a hospital. And when you hear about inpatient services versus outpatient services, prior to 2018, in Sault Ste. Marie, in our community, we didn't have anything other than inpatient services. You had to go to the emergency room to get help. And anybody who had any type of an addiction-related issue was going to the emergency room. And so there was certainly a lot of asks at that time for a treatment center. And there's a lot of words that we're constantly hearing, like treatment, and now we use the word withdrawal management. But ultimately, those two pieces are essentially the same. But what's important to recognize as well, and I know you want to get into some of the specific dollars about that operational as well as capital, but I think it's most critical we remember that when we talk about this continuum of care, treatment or residential withdrawal management is just one very, very, very small piece in that whole continuum of care. And I think the biggest focus that we've had as a government since 2018, and with the nature of the funding that I trust we're going to speak about here today, it's about ensuring that we understand that it's not just that one part of treatment. It's about making sure that you're doing something that's preventative and proactive to being in a position to help people when and where they need it most.
And as I was saying off camera to you, one of the downfalls to me coming into this city just a year ago is I didn't see Sault Ste. Marie before this crisis. I didn't see it when the people tell me it was fragmented and the healthcare was fragmented for the situations that we're seeing now. Looking at some of the numbers and some of the things that I've been able to pull up, what has your government done to, and maybe more importantly, is people past Sault Ste. Marie hearing about the problems that are happening here? Because we live in an isolated little corner of the world, and it seems like what happens in Sault Ste. Marie doesn't always make it to Queen's Park. Is Ministry of Health and them hearing the problems that are happening here and addressing them?
Oh, absolutely. We have to bear in mind that we have 3 members from Northern Ontario who are in cabinet. I think it's fair to say that Northern Ontario has some of the worst rates for mental health and addictions related, opioid related deaths, emergency room visits, and overdoses. It is a fact. The word is very, very clear to our Minister of Health, Christine Elliott, and as well our Associate Minister of Health, Michael Tobolo. They've both been in the Soo. I've had them both here. Michael has been here on a couple of occasions. Christine, our Deputy Premier, has been here as well. I've taken them through so much of what we are dealing with. And that is what led to a lot of the supports that you're seeing here. I think one of the most critical pieces, and I noticed I was actually penning a letter to the mayor earlier today about this. I was with Minister Tabolo just yesterday. He's my seatmate. So I flew in last night from Toronto. By seatmate, we sit next to each other in the House if you ever watch the legislature. And we were chatting about the continuum of care and chatting about the roadmap to wellness and what the plan is. And these are words to everyone, and everybody wants to say, well, how does it impact me? How does this matter to me? And the specific way, and I think this answers your question, is that every single community is unique. We are unique in Sault Ste. Marie, just like Thunder Bay is unique, just like North Bay is unique, and Sudbury, Timmins, and then every other community outside of Northern Ontario. And then if you go into some of our fly-in communities, very, very unique needs there as well. What we need to do is have a very proactive and a preventative type of healthcare for people, for vulnerable people who are suffering through mental health and addictions, that is very, very specific to their unique community needs. Right. Because no single, we would always say in the Sioux, and we still say it, I remember before I got involved in politics, we don't want one size fits all. We don't want to be painted with the same brush as Toronto. We want Sault Ste. Marie solutions. We don't want Toronto excuses.
Or even Northern Ontario solutions for that matter.
Certainly.
Like we are unique in coming from Southern Ontario, coming up here. Healthcare in this part of the province is definitely unique, in good ways and in different ways. Like to me, ever thinking about taking an hour ambulance ride from Wawa to get to the nearest hospital, that doesn't happen where I'm from, where I grew up, and where I spent time. So it's definitely a unique situation. Addictions, mental health is a problem, and we're going to be province-wide. We've talked about this off the record, but it's a province-wide problem, but unique solutions are needed everywhere. What are some of the things that the province has done more specifically to help Sault Ste. Marie's unique issues that we have here?
So locally, I think it's important that we recognize, again, the distinction between what is referred to as an inpatient versus an outpatient service. Before being elected, the services were inpatient, meaning you had to go to the hospital. And I think we need to remember first and foremost that when you get to a hospital, for some people, it might already be too late. There are so many services that we could provide that are outpatient, outside of the hospital. And that was one of the great focuses, was to cover both elements. So if you go back again to 2018, or pre-2018, pre-election, there were no services of a withdrawal management or a treatment center basis. And what we recently announced as a government, there was 2 operational funding announcements that I made with Minister Tabolo and with Minister Elliott just earlier this year for our residential withdrawal management services building. Once upon a time, that was being referred to or called the Level 3 Treatment Center.
That's what everybody in the Sioux still wants. Well, what happened to our Level 3? It's coming. It really is. It's actually under construction. I was by there just the other day. I haven't been able to go inside yet, but construction, I can assure you, construction on that building is happening. And I appreciate all the questions on whether it's happening, but yes, the construction on building is happening. The operational funding, go ahead with the number. What were the numbers again? Because again, I lost them.
The operational funding, there is $343,000 per year. And that is specific to just the operations of the building. That's just the lease, right? That's just to have a lease and to cover a food cost, right, for that facility. Then there's another $155,000 a year that goes to an additional nurse practitioner. Now, bear in mind, there's already funding because those services already exist in the hospital. Right. So there are currently 20 beds in the hospital. That's 16 in a 4 split. 16 beds that are there. And then another 4 beds in hospital are for what are called acute care beds. Right. If you have other very serious health conditions and are also dealing with mental health and addictions, you would be part of that 20-bed system that is already in place, already funded. The $343,000 plus the $155,000 is in addition to the funding that is already in existence there. That now is going to bring us to a grand total when construction is complete, which we would anticipate opening in and around June or July is the expected time frame at the present time. That would be then a 20-bed facility with an additional 4 beds in the hospital, still the acute care beds. Right. So you'd have a net increase in beds of 4 extra beds. Right. However, let's remember, these are only inpatient services. Right. That is it. This is just hospital. I haven't spoken about all of the other parts that did not even exist at all previous to 2018.
Well,
but if I may just very quickly, very, very briefly, that particular facility, you mentioned construction. They're preparing for the construction, so there is work happening.
Yeah.
The final tender for the actual construction will commence, will go out in around December, early January, latest scenario, and then the work on the interior will begin. And while I've announced publicly with Minister Elliott and Minister Tabolo the additional operational money, so that's on top of what is already in existence for the current 20 beds,
Right.
I will still be announcing the capital funding that is yet to come, and everybody will be hearing that news right around the time that we get the tenders finalized.
So we've talked about inpatient. There was a lot. Now we've got the wellness bus. We've got all these other outpatient services that are DSAB's running a wellness bus, and then there's the other outpatient services in the community that you said didn't exist. I can't attest whether they existed or not, so I'm going to take his word for it. He was a sitting councillor at the time, so they didn't exist beforehand. What are some of these services? And I'm looking at like COVID funding for DSAB, which brought in homeless people out of the cold and put them into places so they could be safer and warmer and deal with their mental health. That wasn't used specifically for COVID, like it probably is now, based on what's going on with the Bel Air and other things. But what other funding did you guys provide for out of hospital services?
So that distinction when we talk about inpatient versus outpatient. So there were, previous to 2018, no such thing as there weren't outpatient services. So now what you have in terms of your outpatient services, there's a RAM clinic, right? The RAM clinic, everybody's aware of, it's open Monday to Friday from 9 to 3. Then you also have, in addition to that's your rapid access management clinic. So somebody can walk in the door and get help from someone. They can get some type of prescription, and they can get assistance if they are looking for assistance. So a vulnerable person in need can attend. But what about if you're not available at that time? What about if you're sick outside of that time frame? Well, that happens, obviously. And as opposed to going to an emergency room, again, going to the hospital, you also have what are called now in-home services. In-home services requires you to have a place of your own. So if you're living in your apartment or at home with, whether it be with mom or dad or on your own, and you need assistance, you can call in-home Withdrawal Management Services, and a nurse will come see you. That was funded, again, by our government, and that was to the tune of $120,000 a year to pay for that nurse practitioner to come see you. Now, those services are always available, and that is now a service that didn't exist before, and that is a very important withdrawal management service. Now, there's a third one, which are called mobile services. You referred to the bus, the community wellness bus. Well, that community wellness bus was funded by the provincial government when we put this COVID funding into place. And there are two buckets that were provided specifically, again, operational funding that were provided to our local DSAB specifically. There was an amount of $343,600 and then another amount of $135,000. And that is to make sure that you had a nurse practitioner, again, as well as the other services around, and they were called COVID supports. But again, when we look at those unique needs specific to a community, we recognized as a community like Sault Ste. Marie, COVID then, not so much now obviously, but COVID then wasn't impacting us nearly as much as the mental health and addictions crisis was. And so those dollars, went to provide operational money towards that bus.
Right.
DSAB paid for the ambulance.
Right.
And the province's dollars went towards those operational costs. So now, you mentioned the Bel Air or the Satellite Motel. We know there's some people who are in those places. So that bus is now going directly to locations where they are now providing those services, those outpatient services. So you have your inpatient in the hospital, which absolutely exists. That's one fallacy I hear people say all too often. We don't have any treatment beds. We do. They're at the hospital. It's just that they're currently at the hospital. They used to be downtown on Queen Street, but they were moved to the hospital, and they exist.
And now they're moving to the...
And now they will be moving to the building on Old Garden River Road.
Except for the 4 medical ones. The 4 medical ones, to my understanding, are still staying in the hospital.
The 4 acute care beds will stay in the hospital.
Yeah.
And they will remain there. And I know that when we talk about this distinction of, but the level 3 was 33 beds at one time.
Right.
It was going to be 33 beds, but there were, at that time, the concept of outpatient services wasn't even contemplated. Now you have a RAM clinic, you have in-person, in-home, and you have mobile services that are now also providing much needed withdrawal management. And again, I think it's so critical that we appreciate that not everybody can make it to a hospital. And sometimes it's a little too late. And so if we can help people in their own home, in their community, we can maybe prevent them having to make it to the hospital.
Is there anything else outside of that clinic and some of these out of hospital things that is on the radar for the province to help Sault Ste. Marie right now? Has anything come to your attention or to the Ministry of Health from city officials or people inside, whether it be Chad or others, that the city also needs that you've taken forward to the Ministry of Health that you can think of?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I should say though, taken forward, there are, I suppose you can say, irons in the fire, if I can put it that way. But there are also a number of additional pieces. So when we talk about the wraparound services, when we talk about a continuum of care, there is no silver bullet, and I hate to use that term, but there is no one simple solution to resolving this. And that's where at the outset I indicated, for so long now, and I remember dealing with this with my own family. I remember dealing with it as a lawyer in this community. I did a lot of criminal work. We always want to focus on treatment, but treatment is one small piece of the overall continuum,
Prevention.
right? We need prevention. We need education. We need something that is proactive. We need wraparound supports. So do we only worry about giving somebody treatment when they are in need, when they are at a point of an overdose? What about all the other forms? So what we've done is we've provided, through Algoma Family Services, there is $80,800 that has already been advanced. I announced that earlier last year. And again, operational year-over-year funding. These are all dollars that continue over year for child and youth counseling services. We provided through the Algoma District School Board, again, operational money for students at the ADSB, and it was another $224,142. We provided through the Huron Superior Catholic District School Board another $211,098. Again, year-over-year funding. Then we have at the university level, Algoma University receives $146,823 a year in funding, and Sault College receives $149,252 a
And
year.
this is all for
funding.
mental health and
This is for mental health and addictions counseling services from the level of your primary, secondary, and post-secondary levels of education. Because do we only want to worry about someone when they end up in a hospital, or do we want to make sure that they get help before they wind up there?
I think coming from somebody who has a background in being addicted, as I've admitted to in multiple times, having that available to a 15-year-old who's maybe just tried something once and is starting to go down that rabbit hole, I want everybody out there to understand that these do exist. Like, go to your counselors, go speak with them. They can get you the help before you end up and I hate to say it, some of the people you see, the videos you see that spread all over social media of these individuals downtown who are desperate for help and don't know where to turn. If you have, and we will put something on this to that extent, but if you have an addiction issue, you feel like you're struggling, there are some numbers you can reach out to, and there are supports at your schools, through your school boards, to talk to them. And I'm sure you can also call Ross's office, and he can point you, or somebody at Ross's office can point you in directions for places to get help too.
There was one other significant one we funded through Algoma Family Services, another announcement I made earlier this year, which was for human trafficking.
Right.
And now when you look at through Algoma Family Services, all of the supports that now exist there for those who are dealing with issues around human trafficking, which is absolutely a tremendous problem. And again, you're talking about people who are absolutely in need of help, counseling. If you don't get those services at the first possible opportunity, that is when you may end up turning to addictions. And once you are addicted to that substance, once again, we still want to make sure that those inpatient services are there. The hospital services are critical and important. The treatment services are critical and important. But we still need to counsel people. We need preventative and proactive care. We need wraparound supports. And then there's more to it. We're not even done there. There's housing. We look at all the additional funding that our province has poured into the DSABs locally to make sure that there are good, strong housing initiatives. Great program we did with Councillor Dufour. I thought it was an outstanding idea. I brought Minister Clark to Sault Ste. Marie to see it. We funded a $900,000 program, and we already have 2 houses that have been built by workers.
That's the homeless, or I forget what he called it exactly off the top of my head. But.
I don't recall the name either, but an outstanding program. And I was with him at a house earlier this year, presenting a family with a home. And that was such a smart idea. It's cyclical money. The money was invested. It created the starting point. And now that can be a reoccurring, the pot continues to build to be able to give people a home. All the affordable home ownership things that we are doing to create affordable housing is important because, again, and having dealt with this as a lawyer for so long, someone who gets out of a treatment program, what if they don't have a home to go to?
Right.
What are they going to do now?
Well, and that brings back the argument that's always there. You go to treatment, you spend 28 days there, you leave treatment, you go back to where you left before you went into treatment, to back to what you know, and it, again, cyclical. Unfortunately, that's a reality in multiple communities.
You need housing, right? You need housing. You need to be able to have a chance at a job.
And community supports.
You need the community supports to be able to stay healthy once you get out, because as everybody out there knows, anybody who's ever paid any attention to a 12-step program, all of us have been impacted, at least know somebody who's been impacted by mental health and addictions, knows that you're not good when you don't just walk out of the door of a treatment center and poof, you're done. It's you're fixed. Yeah. No, it's something that you have to continually work at, and you need all of those wraparound supports and community supports to help you. Housing is important, a job is important, so all those pieces contribute.
One of the viewers did ask, and I'm going to ask you, but I'm pretty sure I know the answer. Is there any plans to privatize any of this addictions and mental health care, like to bring in private partners to help in situations like this, where maybe the province isn't able to fund completely what's going on?
Well, there already exist private treatment centers in the province. There are private centers out there, but no, it's not. The province does not. The province would never privatize mental health and addictions care, just like healthcare. And it was a conservative government a long time ago that created healthcare, publicly funded healthcare. There is absolutely never going to be a situation where we do not have a publicly funded healthcare system. And certainly that is part of care. Mental health is health, right? Mental health, and the more and more we learn about mental health, the greater we realize the problem is. And one of the hardest parts about mental health, I think, if I may, there's such a stigma that applies to it, that is attached to it. And people are very, very scared to acknowledge they have a problem. I mean, that's one of the most beautiful things, that when you look at something like Bell Let's Talk, what's that about? It's about being able to communicate to everyone that if you have something wrong, if you're feeling down, you need to talk to somebody. You're not alone. Talk to somebody. And the more we learn, the more the funding is going to have to continue to increase, because we're scratching the surface.
I think, and this was at the rally, and I will give AMH a huge shout out for the rally and having people come speak. One of the things that was brought forward and really hit home to me, because I do suffer from mental health, is if you go to the hospital with a heart attack, you're in Toronto getting heart surgery in 6 hours or whatever it happens to be from here. It's stranger from here, I'm not 100% sure. But if you go to the hospital right now and you have a mental health issue, the time frames are longer. You may want the help now, but it's not there. And like you said, we're just scratching the surface of this issue. And as we move forward out of COVID and everything else, those time frames need to be shortened. Is there anything on the provinces, like we're building beds, we're building treatment facilities, we're building whatever we want to call them. Is there anything that's going to make these, that you're aware of, that's going to make these time frames shorter?
I think, if I may reference it this way, and I'm not sure if you'll recall, but our government spoke of the Mental Health and Addictions Center of Excellence. And centers of excellence are areas where we're trying to focus in on how to solve a problem. One of the greatest problems that we are facing as a society today, certainly within North America, and I've spoken to counterparts in foreign jurisdictions. I've met with ministers in Germany, ministers in France. I actually met the premier of Auvergne, France. I had lunch with him one day. Some places of the world aren't dealing with addictions or opioids the way we are in North America, but certainly it is rampant here. One of the great struggles, and I noticed this as the Minister of Colleges and Universities, and I was responsible for research and innovation when I was there. And in the research portfolio, as a small example, we had over $70 million a year that went to cancer research. Out of a total bucket of $327 million of research money in the province of Ontario, $72 million went to cancer research alone. When you contextualize that, and then I looked at research in the area of mental health and addictions, I started to learn that throughout the entire continent, there is no one dedicated research facility just on mental health and addictions. So as we looked deeper and recognized that as a country, being Canada, that has such a struggle with our history of Indigenous relations, and Indigenous relations, today we speak of truth and reconciliation, we speak of the residential school period. But the difficulty in terms of our country's history with Indigenous relations started even before residential school, right?
Yes, most definitely.
And so that began a long time ago. And those, when we look at specifically so many of the mental health and addiction struggles that we have in Ontario, and especially in Northern Ontario, and you look at our Indigenous populations, I started thinking to myself then, we have a very, very interesting opportunity, I think, in Sault Ste. Marie. And we have, in the entire province of Ontario, the only residential school that you can walk into, and that's at Algoma University, and that's Shingwak Hall. And it was only closed in the 1970s. Yeah. When I moved towards the, I advocated tooth and nail to try to get funding for the Mukwawakaigan, which is the National Reconciliation Center that is now going to be at Shingwak Hall. And again, the only residential school in the entire province of Ontario that you can walk into that's not boarded up. And you can go into that school and you can feel what has existed in those hallways for over 100 years. The point of where I want to go, and people have heard me talk about this, I brought together when I first became Minister of Colleges and Universities, a group of 5. And it was Algoma University, and it was Sault College, and it was Sault Area Hospital, it was SKG Group, our Indigenous Institute, and the Northern Ontario School of Medicine. And I put that group together. They are currently waiting the results of a feasibility study to create the first in the entire continent exclusive facility that would be Ontario's Mental Health and Addictions Research and Training Institute that will focus on research in the area of mental health and addictions and training in the area of mental health and addictions so that we can learn more. To get to your point of what you're saying, we still are just learning so much. We need to learn more because for every individual out there, there's different, we already know the research that we do have in mental health. A drug is going to react differently from one person to another. Some people are more susceptible to an addiction than another. Some people are more susceptible, some people will not respond to certain medications like a Suboxone the same way other people will. So we need more research because this is still relatively new. And to the point I started with on this, we now fund the Cancer Institute with $72 million a year. And look at the progress we've made in some of these areas. You look at the progress we've made in so many different areas. Just look at COVID even.
I want you to take a look into that camera. I can guarantee you right now there are parents and there are individuals who have lost people to addictions and mental health. And I want you, if you were, and people that are probably addicted are watching this, could be watching this too. If you had one message for these individuals, I would like you to share that with them now.
My message is don't give up hope. I absolutely, and we as a government are working towards doing everything we possibly can to help. I think it's so important to know that there is help there, and you have incredible people in this community who are working hard tirelessly every single day. People at the hospital, All of our medical staff, our frontline heroes, they're working tirelessly, and we all are, to try to help. Don't be afraid to access those services, and know that we will not stop until we will continue to advocate for everything that you're going to be able to need. But please know that there's always somebody out there, and don't be afraid to reach out to anyone for help. And certainly you need to know that you're not alone in this, and that it's important just to talk to someone, because I think anybody who is suffering through any type of a mental health and addictions issue needs to know that the first step is talking to someone. And I think that's one of the most critical pieces that we all have to remember.
Shop local, dine local, listen local, love local. Small businesses in the Algoma area have been a huge part of our community. Now is the time to show our support for them. From local markets to retail stores, music venues, and restaurants. Small businesses make up the backbone of our community. So go on, embrace all they have to offer by shopping, dining, listening, and loving local. Visit ssmcoc.com to learn more or to join the chamber today.
I'm joined by Lenny from the Canadian Mental Health Association. Lenny, thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome. Happy to be here.
And what we really want to talk about today is there's a lot of recent events going on in the sporting world involving mental health. And mental health is something that is super important that sometimes seems to get overlooked. So Lenny, let's start off by talking about, do you feel there's more of a stigma towards mental health within the sports world than maybe other organizations?
Especially in professional sports, I could see that being an issue. Even starting off from a young age, kids worry about what other kids are thinking. And, if they struggle with anxiety or depression, or if there's things going on at home that really affects their mental health, they really keep it quiet, and they're afraid that other people are going to find out. And I could see on a large scale, as you move into the professional world, how that could be quite a bit of a concern. Especially when you're televised and things are being promoted, and you have all these endorsements and stuff like that. That any small part of mental health that could be associated with you can affect their image, and that's something to me that's been I've been coaching for almost 20 years, and I could see how if it's affecting young kids at this age. I can't imagine what people in the professional level are having to go through. The stigma is definitely there. The concern is people thinking that it can happen to, just about people, not knowing that it can happen to just about anybody is probably the biggest concern. You could be sitting across from somebody at the supper table, the dinner table, doing an interview like this. One of the two of us could be struggling with mental illness. And you would rarely know, because it's not something that we talk about openly as much as we should.
And then when you mention your coaching experience, did you notice a change in people starting to talk about their mental health struggles more in recent years, or has it always been sort of a stigma where athletes especially just don't want to talk about it?
It's something that I've lived my whole life, growing up playing sports in both hockey and soccer. It's something we never talked about, at a young age. My home life was my home life. Whatever I did at home and whatever was happening at home, always stayed at home. When I got to the field and I got to the rink, it was something that, I just try not to talk about, try not to just kind of forget about it. And it's what I use sports for, really, is to kind of shut that out. But at the end of the day, I know there was about 4 or 5 in every dressing room I was in that probably were in the same circumstances. And that stuff snowballs, not being able to talk about it at a young age and worrying about whatever people are thinking and all that kind of stuff. But today, as I've, been coaching the last several years, we talk about it. It's something that we bring to the forefront. It's almost like we have opened the doors and told everyone that it's okay. It's okay to talk about it. It's okay to bring it to whoever to talk about. And we've always had somebody on the team now to kind of work through those issues with people. Having somebody that we can kind of direct more of that stuff to. We'd like it to be the coach. The coach is the one that everybody looks up to. And with proper training and just a little bit of, a little bit of offerings of education, I think that the coaches can make a huge impact.
So then let's say another coach is looking to be able to make that impact for their team. Is there a service that they can go to get the proper training so they can make sure they're dealing with mental health issues the right way?
Yeah, through the Canadian Mental Health, there are several programs through the mental health promotion, training, and education purposes. The mental health first aid, we have the assist training, we have the Safe Talk, the Talk Today. The Talk Today is more based towards the sporting programs. What they do is they provide training to most of the teams, and within those teams, they provide, like through the players and the support staff, they direct almost like a mental health coach. So the mental health coach from CMHA will provide all the information that the team needs in order to kind of have the proper education to the team and the guidelines to where to go. And within that team, there'll be almost like a mental health champion, they'll call them, so that there's kind of a direction between who the team can go to get those services, and then to kind of navigate back and forth for the services. And then there's also the Talk Today events that you see some of the teams here locally just to promote and educate on game nights and stuff like that.
And then would you say when teams locally and athletes locally and coaches locally are trying to do this, do you think when professional athletes are starting to talk more about their mental health or their addiction struggles, do you think that's actually helping down in the junior leagues?
Yes, absolutely. Our kids look up to, the professional athletes so much that anything they do and right down to what kind of stick they use, all that kind of stuff. For them to be speaking on stuff like this, if any of that was experienced by them, I think they know now it's okay to go and tell a parent, to go tell a friend, a mental health counselor, someone who they trust. The doors are definitely starting to swing open, which is fantastic because, like I said, if it's happening at that higher level, I can only imagine what at the younger levels what some of these kids are going through and are unable to open and communicate with a professional.
And then I want to talk about for an athlete that's trying to jump into that professional level, and we all know that stress can really weigh on your mental health. So what are some things that a young athlete can do or services they could reach out to if they're struggling with, let's say they're trying to make it into the OHL or the NHL or whatever type of jump they're trying to make in their sports career?
With something like this, I'd probably offer my personal experience. Growing up, especially at a young age, if you start to kind of develop any symptoms that you're not sure what they are or how they're affecting you, I could also use my daughter as an example who struggled with anxiety growing up, playing hockey from a very young age. At first, it seems like it's very difficult to open those doors. But once you start talking about it and sharing with someone, especially if you're aware of someone who has either lived through something like this as a player, having someone to go to and be able to explain all these feelings, emotions to work through is probably very beneficial at a young age. It's very rarely do we see players able to get through most of this stuff on their own without some type of support. Like I said, with my daughter, I was able to myself coach her through not only player development, but also through her mental health struggles. Only because, of my upbringing, the way I was brought up and some of the things that went on in my life, they were kind of similar to what she was going through. And I just know from experience. And for a player at a young age to be able to find someone like that is highly beneficial and probably life-saving at some point.
And then when you mentioned about how you were able to help your daughter, what's something that parents can do as well if they see their young loved ones struggling with mental health? What's some things that they can do to make sure that they're doing the right things and not the wrong things?
So that comes down to the whole stigma of mental health. We as parents always, when the teacher calls us at school and says, your kid's doing this at school, we kind of shy away and say, no, that can't be my kid. Open the door, open the line of communication with your child. If you see something's different, ask the questions. There's so many questions that need to be asked to try to get out what the child is actually feeling and what kind of symptoms and all that stuff. If I can look back now, I would definitely do some more digging into what was going on, because sometimes you hear something that you kind of don't want to hear. But as a parent, you have to be accepting into no matter what your child is telling you, that's your child. And in order to support them, in order to help them grow, you have to be able to give them the supports they need and for them to work through it.
And then just before we go and we move to a new topic, I just want to speak on, if there's someone struggling with mental health, what is the one biggest recommendation you can give to them moving forward?
Don't be scared. Know that there's lots of people out there that are, going through something similar. It's never too small of an issue. It's never too big of an issue to tell, but you have to be able to talk to people. Find someone that you trust, healthcare professional, mental health professional, a friend, a family member. Don't be afraid and listen. Make sure you're listening. The most important part we can be a part of is actually listening to our kids and listening for those, those cues that give us some type of red flag, and educate our kids as much as you can.
Superior Adult Learning is looking for volunteers who want to make a difference in our community and help others reach their full potential. In only a few hours a week, you can help our learners achieve their goals and set them on a path towards a successful, independent future. Visit www.superioral.ca to get started now.
Thank you for joining me today. This is another segment in our mental health, homelessness, and addictions awareness that we're bringing to the community. Today we're with Lisa Case. Lisa's going to tell me what her position is at the hospital, because I can guarantee you I'll mess it up. Thank you for joining me, Lisa.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it. As Dan mentioned, my name is Lisa Case. I'm the clinical director for mental health and addictions here at Surrey Hospital right now. I've been with Surrey Hospital in the mental health and addictions field for 20 plus years at this point, working directly in the field, in the community, as well as in hospital and some of our outpatient programs. Moved into a leadership role in 2013 and into the clinical director role just in the last year and a half.
And with knowing your position there, you're probably the best person, and everybody said you're the best person in the community to talk to about this issue overall. So what role does SAH have in the overall addictions, mental health, and homelessness situation in Sault Ste. Marie?
Well, I think there's probably a number of people to talk to, but I certainly appreciate you coming to me as well. Surrey Hospital, we're a partner in providing mental health and addiction services to our community. We offer specifically what's called acute care. So our emergency department, our medical floors, intensive care unit, all for mental health and addictions as well. We have a specialized inpatient mental health unit for both children and adolescents and adults, two separate units. As well, we have an addiction medicine consult team that's available to support care across all of our inpatient areas and the emergency department. And then in an outpatient and community-based mental health services, mental health and addiction services, we have outpatient mental health services, which is psychiatry, social work, nursing support through therapy and nursing. We have addictions counseling as well. We have rapid access addiction medicine. That's a clinic downtown. We have in-home and mobile withdrawal management now. Obviously, I think everyone's aware of our residential withdrawal management. We're also a partner with the Community Wellness Bus, a partner with 137 East Street residents. We are partnered with the Community Walk-In Counseling located at Canadian Mental Health. And we also have an assertive community treatment team for those with severe and persistent mental illness. We work as a partner with several other social service and health organizations, including the Algoma Ontario Health Team, on initiatives like the Wellness Bus, providing direct primary care as well as specialized mental health and addictions care to the community where the community members are. So particularly in some areas where we know there's higher risk for homelessness or being underhoused with mental health and addictions issues as well, and providing non-urgent medical care there too. We specifically engage with our patient and family advisors that we have here at Surrey Hospital, those with lived experience. They directly provide their input to our staff and our leaders to help improve care. Some of those experiences have led to improvements with, how we handle patient or client belongings in our care, access to things like telephone and internet, being able to access social media while they're in care, working to address stigma both within our patient and client populations, but also with our staff and physicians. And specifically in regards to withdrawal management, we have a group of patient and family advisors that are helping to co-design that facility, including the furnishings and the fixtures and equipment that we'll use there. We're also working with social services right now to support the underhoused and the homeless, particularly right now in the COVID-19 pandemic, providing infection prevention and control consultation, staffing support, consultation of physical resources as well. Those are some of the things that we're doing to help the situation in Sault Ste. Marie.
So we've seen, or at least I've seen you present to council, a continuum of care. It looked like a triangle to me, so I called it a treatment triangle. The continuum of care, can you explain that a little bit more, like why the be-all end-all of this is not necessarily inpatient residential care and why some of these other things actually help reduce some of these issues?
Yeah, absolutely. And they're essential, that continuum of care, or that triangle. And I appreciate that. It's a triangle with the base being the broadest piece. And that's the piece where most of the general population will fit, those with kind of low intensity needs. Individuals, so we talk about things that we all need: health promotion, general wellness, family support, school-based prevention, those initiatives. And then if we move up that tier, up to the next tier or the next platform there, we think of things like primary care, public health, employment programs. Those with moderate needs need outreach services, and we'll talk about that hopefully in a few minutes. But then we think of like outpatient or community-based interventions. So as I mentioned, outreach services, opioid replacement therapies, alcohol treatment, home-based withdrawal management, which we'd see there as well, or in community withdrawal management. Move up to the next level, you end up with a little bit more specialized care, and fewer people need this type of care. But we'd see outpatient counseling, intensive day treatment, where someone would go for care and attend throughout the day and then stay in their own home or at a friend's place at night. We have supportive residential withdrawal management, which is another level of care. That's part of what we offer here in Sault Ste. Marie. And then at the top of that tier, we would see like very specialized services, inpatient services, residential withdrawal management, medically supported withdrawal management. So where we've been able to add in registered nurses, nurse practitioner, physician support and consultation to that service as well. So what we would see is at the bottom, most if not all of us need that low intensity self-care, family support, prevention activities. The service need, their service intensity is quite low. The service volume, the number of people that need that, is quite high. As we move to the top of the tier, the service intensity is very high. And the number of individuals that require that level of care is much lower than that base. Hopefully that gives you a better understanding of that triangle. It's something that we adopted from the Addictions and Mental Health Ontario, and I believe they adopted it from the Canadian Centre for Substance Use and Addiction.
So it's well studied and well researched, and you've been seeing some, I'm guessing you have been seeing some success with this, correct?
Yes, yeah, we are starting to see a number of things that are helping to divert people from needing the most intensive care. It does and it will take a while to get that flip to happen, and particularly around prevention and having people avoid having to get into the system for care altogether.
We spoke with Ross Romano last week on the same subject matter, and he was giving me some stuff the province has done to help SAH, but he did say to ask you what other things, is he sure he missed some. What are some of the things that SAH has asked the province for and have been provided to help this situation?
I think certainly the most public one that people are aware of is that we continue to work with the Ministry of Health, Ontario Health North, Minister Romano, to support the relocation of our residential withdrawal management. We moved from Queen Street into Sioux Area Hospital as a result of some rising risks in the building that we were in back in March of 2020. We've been housed within Sioux Area Hospital, but operating as a residential withdrawal management since then. So continue to work with those folks and the province on securing that site, making good progress, designing the new site and renovation. Services currently offered at Sioux Area Hospital, they'll be relocated to that new facility. And in addition to that new facility, we'll expand services to 24 beds in total. That's an increase of 8 beds from what we had downtown. And then plus the newly added in-home and mobile withdrawal management. And I'll speak to that. We've been supported by the Ministry of Health and Minister Romano, Ontario Health North in some specific investments to expand mental health and addiction services, particularly the addiction medicine consult team, which provides support and consultation to the hospital emergency department and any of the medical units, as well as the inpatient psychiatric units. They provide consultation and support both from a medical and a psychosocial perspective. We've also been able to add the Rapid Access Addiction Medicine Clinic that came on board in 2018 with a financial investment. And then again in 2021, so very early in this year, we received some funding to add additional nurse practitioner resources to that location. We have registered nursing now to support residential withdrawal management and in-home withdrawal management. For many years, many years, we were supported solely by social service workers or addiction service workers in that particular program. They did great work, but being able to really enhance that with the support of our nursing expertise. And now we are currently in the process of recruiting for a nurse practitioner to support that service as well. We've also been able to add what's called enhanced safe beds. So beds for individuals that require a longer stay. So not necessarily more intensive care, but they need a longer stay. They would often come to us with co-occurring mental health, addictions, and some involvement with the justice system as well. We've been able to expand that program with the provincial support. In addition, the Mobile Crisis Rapid Response Team, which started as a pilot, a collaboration with Sault Ste. Marie City Police, specially trained officers with mental health and addictions, nurses and social workers that support that team. Then in addition, a few other supports that I am aware of that we work quite closely with through Canadian Mental Health Association of Algoma, peer support in our emergency department, those with lived experience that are paid peer workers that provide support to individuals accessing the emergency department that need someone to talk to. They may need support in how to access care, navigating the system, that sort of thing. That particular service has been impacted significantly by the COVID-19 pandemic with trying to keep the traffic in our emergency department lower, but it is available virtually through telephone support right now. And we will most definitely welcome those workers back into our emergency department as soon as we're able. And then in addition, there's been, and I know this one might be hard to swallow right now, but additional mental health justice supportive housing added into the system as well. We still aren't at capacity to support those that need that, but that's through Canadian Mental Health. And we often, our services at the hospital make referrals to that particular service quite often. But those are some of the investments that I'm aware of from the province.
Does the city have a role in working with you guys to address this issue?
Well, I certainly can't speak for the mayor, but I can tell you that we've worked very closely with Mayor Provenzano. He's been, I would say, a tireless advocate for bringing the new facility specifically to our community. We continue to work with him and City Council, our community partners, to try and not only add additional services, but improve the quality of the services that we have in our community.
When I reached out to the community for some questions, and a lot of really weird ones came back, and that wasn't what I expected. One of the ones that did come back a couple of times revolves around Suboxone and Methadone. Now, those are two treatment options for individuals that show up with addictions down the road. Is that on the formulary at the hospital?
Yeah, it's a great question. Both are currently on the formulary at the hospitals. Methadone has been on the formulary for many years at this point. Suboxone is a relatively new add, and that has to do with provincial legislation and the special training that was required at one point for to be able to prescribe Suboxone, but both are available. They can be ordered and reordered by what's called the most responsible physician. So the physician who's providing your primary care in hospital and who follows the current legislation. For that physician, if they would like support in both assessing the client or the patient at that point, if they're in hospital, and prescribing, that addiction medicine consult team is available to support them in that. So if we have a physician who hasn't prescribed those medications before, is uncertain, wants to be careful in doing that, that team is available to provide support, not only to the physician, but to the staff and the patient themselves. And then with withdrawal management, an improvement that we've been able to make in the last year, provincial standards would not allow us to store those medications on site. So we did some work with a local pharmacy. We have an agreement that's been developed. Our care team is now able to prescribe those medications, and prescriptions can be delivered to the unit 24 hours a day within the hour. So what our workaround prior to that was that we would, get a family member or put somebody in a cab to get to the pharmacy to get their medication.
I'd heard that a couple of times for sure.
Yeah, it was, and not just a challenge here in Sault Ste. Marie, it's a challenge across residential withdrawal management across the province. That's since changed. So we're really happy to be working with the pharmacy we are. Additionally, the provincial standards have changed. So when we move to the new facility, we'll be able to store those medications on site as well. But in addition to those two medications, so those are very helpful medications for individuals that are struggling with opioids. We have a number of clients that use multiple substances. We have other individuals who use alcohol somewhat exclusively. But with the support of the nursing team and physician leadership, we've been able to develop medical directives to support clients through their withdrawal symptoms, including things for sleep, fever, pain, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, nicotine replacement, the things that historically when we were downtown, and before we had the nurses on board, we would have to send someone up to the emergency department for all of those things. And now we are able to care for them on site within withdrawal management. We'll be able to do that at the new location as well.
And that actually brings me around to my next question. How's the breakdown going to work at the new location? Like, we know we have the 4 beds inside the emergency room right now that are for this, and then we have the residential that's in-house at the moment. Out of all of this, what is moving to the new facility on Old Garden River Road?
Yeah, so the 4 medical beds, or what we call medical beds or in-hospital beds, they'll stay here at the hospital, and they're intended really for if not necessarily the emergency department. The emergency department, you're not actually an inpatient yet. You're not an admitted patient, but we'll certainly care for individuals there. But those 4 beds can float between our intensive care unit, depending on what the person's needs are, our medical units, our inpatient psychiatric unit, our child and youth psychiatric unit, or our pediatric or women and children's health as well. So in that, those 4 beds will stay here. We'll have 20 beds at the new location. That breakdown there will be 10 beds for what we would consider acute withdrawal. So individuals that are either acutely intoxicated or in active and acute withdrawal. They need close observation and support from both the nursing team and the addiction service workers. We'll also have 10, what we would call on paper, post-acute beds. Those would encompass the safe beds as well. So those are individuals that have they're no longer intoxicated. They're through that early and initial withdrawal, but they still need a period of stabilization. Of those 20 beds, each will be in a private room. So we'll have 20 private rooms with 20 private washrooms, and those include two specific rooms that are designated for those that would have alternative care needs. So they need a low sensory room. Maybe they have a high history of trauma. Depending on the substances they've needed, they need a very quiet room of high intensity for space, safety and space in that. Those particular rooms, we've spent a great deal of time researching and what the furnishings and fixtures will look like in those rooms as well. And then on top of the 24 beds total, so 4 here at the hospital, 20 in the community at the new location, we're also now able to offer outpatient and community-based withdrawal management. So both within rapid access addiction medicine, so being able to access that clinic with the appropriate resources, one could avoid withdrawal altogether and get that support from both medication and counseling support. And then in-home mobile withdrawal management. So we have a very small team that is able to provide that support for individuals that would have like low to moderate withdrawal symptoms, but they have a safe place to stay. So they can get that monitoring and support, the medication, and the counseling, but in, say, either in the comfort of their own home, perhaps in shelter at a friend or family member's house as well.
So we look at that. So once they've reached the top of that continuum of care, walking them back down to the bottom is kind of possible too, when you're talking about the RAM clinic and this in-home stuff, correct? Right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay. So only a few more minutes left here with you. How does SEH envision the new treatment center helping the community? Is like, we know we're going to be able to keep methadone and Suboxone on site. How else is it going to help the community with the ongoing issues?
I think, particularly about increasing capacity. So we know that this particular service will fall kind of at the higher end of that continuum. So at near the top of the triangle, including those medical beds would be at the very top. So increasing capacity where we were for 40 plus years downtown, providing, the best service we could under the conditions that we had. I think we'll see that we're finally able to offer that top tier service here in Sault Ste. Marie consistently. And then it allows us to continue to build. So beyond the new facility, but being able to, the investments that have been made with those other services, and as they grow, so some of them are in their infancy yet, we continue to work with, as I said, by our patient and family advisors, our community partners to streamline those, to work together so that we can get more mileage out of them. But I think it's a key piece so that those that need that most intensive care can get that here in Sault Ste. Marie. So we talk about timely care, accessible care, close to home, that's really tailored to the individual needs. And I know I mentioned it earlier, but being able to co-design that with those that have used the space, that are familiar with the needs of those individuals, has been essential and invaluable.
And if you had the ability to say, I want one thing past the treatment center and anything else to bring to the community to help the overall situation, what would it be from your opinion?
I think if I had, I'm going to go with two maybe. If I had one that I could ask each and every individual that is able to, is to, take a mental health first aid course, and in doing that, get some naloxone training through any of the local pharmacies and carry a naloxone kit, save a life. And then if I were to ask perhaps those community members, the municipality, our community partners, I would say harm reduction, early intervention, and prevention. So we need to keep pushing together collectively, make the most of what we have, and to continue to create, healthy, safe, affordable places for people to spend time, to gather, particularly our children and youth. We need safer places for them to do that.
And we asked Ross this question. I'm going to ask you this question too. I know there are parents out there that have maybe lost children, or there are people out there that are struggling with addictions right now that are probably watching this. What would your message be to them?
To hang in there as best they can. One piece that we are doing that I'm pretty excited about, it feels like it's taking way too long, but we just started on this journey. We've started on a partnership with a group that's affiliated with the Canadian Centre for Substance Use and Addiction. So they're a national group, and our local partners are working to create a document based on, there's a template called Parents Like Us. So I would say Google Parents Like Us. It's out of Victoria, BC. But we're looking to develop a document here with that same level of best practice guidelines, the things that we know that work, but then develop local content. And we'll need all of our community partners' help to do that, but helping them with the informal support and navigating the system, because we know just even what we talked about today, there's lots of moving parts. It's a complicated system. We want to work towards one door, but I would say hang in there and check out that resource and watch for the upcoming resource that we're going to develop together.
Thank you for joining me today, Lisa. This has been very informative.
Thanks very much, Dan. Appreciate it.
Have a good day.
Take care.
Good morning. Before we get started with this interview, I am going to let you know that we are allowed to do this maskless as per APH guidelines. The APH guideline reads, film and TV production sets must be set up to allow every person to maintain physical distancing except when necessary for filming of the film or TV production. In this case, Chief Hugh Stevenson is 6 feet away from me, even though it may not look that way on camera. We measured it out this morning. Thank you for joining me today, Chief.
Thanks for having me.
This is another segment in our series on mental health and addictions and homelessness in Sault Ste. Marie. And everybody goes back to, and when I'm in different groups and talking to different people, they all go back to the police play a big role in this in a certain way. Why don't we explain a bit about what your role is when it comes to homelessness, mental health, and addictions?
Sure. I mean, that's a big catchment issue.
It is.
Specifically with addictions, Northern Ontario and North America have been impacted by long-term drug addiction through opioids. We all know that. It's been here probably a good 7 to 8 years. And police services and communities across Northern Ontario specifically struggle with it more, simply because it becomes more obvious in medium-sized urban centers where people gather for services. So what's the Sault Ste. Marie Service response to long-term drug addiction? We're strong supporters of prevention, that public education and awareness at all levels, whether it's your employer, whether it's your family, whether it's your social network, everyone should be aware of what their neighbor, their friend, their brother, their mother is doing when it comes to drug usage. And you should be looking for signs of addiction. You should be looking for changes in behavior. And the reason I say that is that if we can catch people and get them treatment and get them supports before they get addicted, then we save the community, the family, long-term harm. More importantly, we save lives by doing that. So as we know, cannabis was legalized a year and a half ago. The service, we do not prosecute and charge people for possession type offenses. We do for drug trafficking, if that's trafficking for the purpose or actually trafficking. So in those cases, we'll give them the full breadth of the law and they will be put before the courts.
So we're going to go on to, so somebody calls 911 and they're having a mental health crisis, or they're having, and we'll go with a mental health crisis at this moment. What steps, what does that trigger inside the police department?
Well, the first thing you'll be asked on a 911 call with the SERB operators, are you okay? Do you need the police? Are you in crisis? What's your situation? And that will dictate the type of response. If a third party is phoning about someone in crisis in the middle of the street or in their home, we will definitely send a priority 1 call there, simply because we want to make sure everything's okay. So really, the amount of seriousness that comes across on the call will dictate our response. But if a person is in crisis, call 911, and we will make sure that ourselves and other emergency services get there appropriately and make the situation safe.
So we have a crisis unit now. That was something that was referred to when we were talking with both the MPP and Lisa Case, and she said the police have this crisis unit with some specially trained individuals. Can you give me a little more information on what that crisis unit does and what it's trained to do?
Sure. The Mobile Crisis Rapid Response Teams was created, I believe, in 2017, originally started before I got here. And the results of it were incredible in terms of what we can do to meet the needs of people who are in mental health crisis. So we currently have now 4 trained frontline police officers in mental health crisis. We also have more than 4 social workers and nurses that ride around on basically days and afternoon shifts. Any type of crisis call that comes across the calls for service, they will be immediately dispatched to it. They're trained in, our officers are certainly trained in de-escalation, understanding what mental health looks like, trying to understand what type of drug they're on, ensuring they get safety immediately, whether that's through EMS or ourselves through Narcan. And so all of those issues basically make a much more safer community. You know, there's a lot of talk and speculation about, well, should the police be dispatched to mental health calls? And the reality is, maybe not all of them, but when we have this combo unit, if you want to refer to it, where we have both the social worker and the officer that are both trained in it, both understand how to de-escalate the situation, and even if we have to take them to the hospital, the information that gets to the doctor comes from a mental health professional. So it's a wonderful program, and I can tell you we will continue to expand that as resources become available.
And on de-escalation, you aren't just trained to de-escalate, and I'm going to get a little bit off of this here, but you're not just trained to de-escalate mental health situations. De-escalation is key for all police situations, correct?
Yeah.
And I just wanted to make sure that people out there were aware that this doesn't happen just for mental health. They get called to any call, and their first step is to try and de-escalate.
Right.
It's part of that wheel that we all learned.
And de-escalation started, I'm going to say, at least 10 to 12 years ago, where all police training, whether it was senior executive training, middle management, or frontline, were trained on the issue of de-escalation. And that was due to a number of scenarios in Central Ontario where, you know, things went the other way.
So out in the community, everybody's saying, well, these individuals are stealing the mental health and addictions and everything else, and C75 isn't helping the situation. I had one person tell me, well, and this is from another police service, we can't lock them up, which makes it a little more difficult. How is C75 either making this better? Is it making it worse? Is it just not really a factor in the ongoing situation in Sault Ste. Marie?
Well, C75 came along at the same time as long-term drug addiction did, as, you know, homelessness numbers, and it doesn't help things to a degree. It comes out of the Supreme Court of Canada decision called R versus Antic, and what it is, it's a ladder effect where the more times you're involved with the police, the greater chances you're going to be held. 15 years ago, there was more of a presumption that you would be held for bail. Today, there's more of a presumption that you be released, and only if there's evidence to indicate further criminal behavior will you be held. I'm very confident that our frontline officers are exercising Bill C-75 as it was intended. In fact, we hear back from the courts and the Crown Attorney, you're doing everything you're supposed to be doing with this. However, when you look at the number of people that are on long-term releases with multiple charges, it causes concern. Maybe in the old world, pre-C-75, those people would be held for bail. Today, there may be more of an emphasis to release them. However, it is only one issue in the big pot of issues that we deal with. And that's about it.
And I think that's going to help because everybody goes, well, it's C-75 is causing them to be released. There's a whole lot of other issues out there. Like you said, it's just one part of a bigger cog, bigger wheel, right? So
and even within release, every release is tailored to the individual situation. So you can't say, well, the call was this, and how come they're here? The reality is you need experts to go in and look at what is the issue of risk here. And the courts, the Crown Attorneys, the Defense Counsel, all play a role in that.
Do you have a percentage for how many of your calls in a year? I know the hack may have made this a little difficult, but do you have a percentage for how many of your calls this year are related to mental health addictions? Give or take?
We've had, in total mental health calls, we've had approximately 3,000 this year. The actual mental health calls where the person is suffering from a mental disorder has remained relatively consistent, but the personal well-being calls that get lumped into that has been up by about a third. Now that has a lot to do with community anxiety, it has a lot to do with COVID. I mean, COVID has affected people in many ways, right? Where they're concerned for their family members. We go on wellness checks to check on the elderly, check on people that just haven't been seen lately. So they're up about a third.
So if there was anything else, when we know we have parents, we have probably people that are addicted that are watching this with us as we're recording it, what would you want to say to them?
In relation to?
In relation to mental health and getting help or calling for help or anything to that effect?
It's similar to my introductory comments. The reality is the Sioux is one big family, and we're all much more connected here than we are probably most communities in Ontario. And that serves us well by making sure that we connect to and we're aware of what's going on with our friends, our family, our cousins, our neighbors. You know, I know it sounds minimal in terms of prevention, but who has the most opportunity to observe you is your family members. And if you see that family member acting differently, acting strangely, have the conversation, have the discussion about drug usage, have the discussion about mental health, have the discussion about when they've seen mental health professionals. And you can save lives by doing this. You can start the process so that people can be saved before they go down this pathway of, you know, homelessness, long-term drug addiction, and they're not all related, by the way. Homelessness is much different than long-term drug addiction and opioid use. But the reality is, I think, as a community and as family and friends, we need to be aware of and get people the help they need at the time, and don't let it wait.
Thank you for joining me today, Chief.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.